World War II remains one of the most significant and devastating conflicts in human history. Lasting from 1939 to 1945, it involved more than 30 nations and reshaped the world in ways we still feel today. But to understand how the deadliest war in history began, we must first look at the conditions that made it possible. The origins of World War II can be traced back to the end of the First World War in 1918. The Great War, as it was called, left Europe devastated. Millions had died, empires had collapsed, and entire economies were ruined. In 1919, the victorious Allied powers imposed the Treaty of Versailles on Germany. This treaty stripped Germany of its colonies, limited its military, and forced it to pay huge reparations. The German people felt humiliated and betrayed, and this resentment became fertile ground for radical ideologies. Amidst this anger, economic depression struck the world in 1929. The Great Depression caused mass unemployment, poverty, and political instability. In Germany, the crisis opened the door for Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party, the Nazis. Hitler promised to restore German pride, rebuild the economy, and overturn the Treaty of Versailles. His fiery speeches and promises attracted millions of followers. By the early 1930s, Hitler rose to power as chancellor, and soon after, dictator. He rearmed Germany in defiance of the Versailles Treaty, rebuilt the military, and launched propaganda campaigns that glorified war and nationalism. He also spread a dangerous ideology of racial superiority, targeting Jews and other minorities as enemies of the German state. But Germany was not the only nation preparing for expansion. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had established a fascist regime. He dreamed of reviving the Roman Empire and expanding Italy's power. Meanwhile, in Japan, military leaders sought to dominate Asia and the Pacific, beginning with the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and later China in 1937. These aggressive nations, Germany, Italy, and Japan, would later form the Axis powers. The world watched with concern, but the great democracies of Britain, France, and the United States were hesitant to act. The horrors of World War I were still fresh, and most nations wanted to avoid another large-scale war. Instead, they followed a policy of appeasement, allowing Germany to take small victories in the hope that Hitler would eventually be satisfied. But Hitler was never satisfied. In 1936, he remilitarized the Rhineland, a violation of the Versailles Treaty. No one stopped him. In 1938, he annexed Austria in what was called the Anschluss, claiming it was a unification of German-speaking peoples. Again, the world stood by. Later that year, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia, claiming it belonged to Germany. Britain and France gave in, signing the Munich Agreement, hoping this concession would secure peace. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain famously declared, "Peace for our time," but peace did not last. In March 1939, Hitler broke his promise and invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia. It became clear that Hitler would not stop until all of Europe was under his control. The final spark came on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Using a new tactic called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, German tanks, aircraft, and soldiers crushed Polish defenses with speed and precision. Just 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. The conflict quickly spread across Europe. In 1940, Hitler launched a rapid series of invasions. Denmark and Norway fell in April. Then, in May, Germany invaded Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Within weeks, France surrendered and German troops marched triumphantly into Paris. Only Britain remained unconquered. In the summer of 1940, Hitler launched the Battle of Britain, an all-out air assault on the United Kingdom. German bombers attacked cities night after night in what became known as the Blitz. Yet, the Royal Air Force, with the help of new radar technology, successfully defended the skies. For the first time, Hitler's advance was stopped. Meanwhile, the war expanded beyond Europe. In North Africa, Italian and German forces sought to control the Suez Canal and vital oil resources. In Asia, Japan continued its brutal war in China, while eyeing further expansion into Southeast Asia. By 1941, the world was fully engulfed in war. But the most shocking events were still to come: the German invasion of the Soviet Union and Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, which would draw the United States into the conflict. As the war dragged on, the world witnessed some of the most brutal and decisive battles in history. By 1941, Hitler had conquered much of Europe, but his ambition pushed him further east. In June of that year, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Millions of German troops stormed across the border, expecting a quick victory. But the vast Russian landscape, the bitter cold of winter, and the resilience of Soviet soldiers turned the campaign into a disaster for the Nazis. The Battle of Stalingrad in 1940 to 1943 became the turning point. The German army was encircled and defeated, marking the first major blow to Hitler's war machine. Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan's aggression was growing rapidly. On December 7, 1941, Japanese planes attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The surprise assault sank ships, destroyed planes, and killed thousands of soldiers. The attack brought the United States directly into the war. Overnight, it transformed the conflict into a truly global battle, with American power joining the Allies. In North Africa, British and American forces fought against German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox. After months of back-and-forth fighting, the Allies pushed the Axis out of Africa. By 1943, this victory opened the path to invade southern Europe. Soon, Allied troops landed in Italy, toppling Mussolini's fascist regime and weakening Germany's southern defenses. On the other side of the world, the Pacific War raged on. The US Navy clashed with Japan in massive naval battles, such as the Battle of Midway in 1942, where American aircraft carriers dealt a crushing blow to the Japanese fleet. Island by island, the Allies fought their way across the Pacific, facing brutal resistance but slowly pushing Japan back. By 1944, the Allies were ready to strike at the heart of Nazi-controlled Europe. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, thousands of Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy in France. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite heavy casualties, the operation succeeded and marked the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe. At the same time, the Soviet Union launched massive offensives on the Eastern Front, driving German forces back toward Berlin. The two fronts east and west were closing in on Hitler's empire. The war had reached its decisive phase, and the end of the Nazi regime was drawing near. The year 1943 marked a dramatic shift in the direction of the war. Germany's defeat at Stalingrad had shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. In North Africa, the Allies gained control after the decisive Battle of El Alamein, pushing German and Italian forces out of the region. This allowed the Allies to move into Italy, where Mussolini's government collapsed, and Italy eventually surrendered. However, German forces continued to resist fiercely, turning Italy into another bloody battlefield. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the United States adopted an island-hopping strategy, capturing key islands while bypassing heavily fortified Japanese positions. The battles of Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Saipan showcased the brutal and unforgiving nature of the Pacific War. Each victory brought the Allies closer to Japan, but the cost in lives was staggering. At the same time, American and British bombers intensified their air campaigns over Germany, reducing its cities and industries to rubble. In June 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, also known as D-Day, with the largest amphibious invasion in history. Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, and after weeks of brutal fighting, managed to establish a foothold in Western Europe. From there, the Allies pushed steadily forward, liberating Paris by August and driving German forces back toward their homeland. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union advanced relentlessly, reclaiming vast territories and pressing into Poland and Eastern Europe. By early 1945, Germany was surrounded. The Allies closed in from the west, while Soviet forces moved toward Berlin from the east. In April, Adolf Hitler took his own life in his underground bunker as the Third Reich crumbled around him. On May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered, marking the end of the war in Europe, a day remembered as Victory in Europe, or V-Day. Yet, the war raged on in the Pacific. Despite heavy losses, Japan refused to surrender. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were among the bloodiest of the entire conflict, showing that a full-scale invasion of Japan would be catastrophic. To avoid further massive casualties, the United States made the controversial decision to use a new and terrifying weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was devastated, followed 3 days later by Nagasaki. The destruction was unprecedented, and Japan finally agreed to surrender on August 15, 1945, bringing World War II to an end. The cost of the war was staggering. More than 70 million people lost their lives, entire cities lay in ruins, and the world was forever changed. The United Nations was formed in an effort to prevent future global conflicts, while the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the new superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. The legacy of World War II continues to shape our world, reminding us of both the horrors of war and the resilience of humanity.